Testing, testing. Hello, hello, hello. This is Sean Little with the Yellow Coat Club podcast. I'm excited to join you here today. It is a new year. New year, new you, all the sayings. And today I wanted to talk through. So if you've had a chance to read the Yellow Coat Club, I'd love to hear from you and get any feedback that you have. But for those of you that have or have not read it, so throughout the book, one of the premises or ideas that I had as I was putting pen to paper was wanting to leave something as a not necessarily a legacy for my child, but for those of you that know my story, my parents died when I was young, and so I grew up always, often wondering what my dad would say about my life. What are the things that he would pass on to me? And so this way, my hope is that at least there's a fragment of knowledge that my son Jack will not have to wonder. I've jotted it down, I've written it to him, and so in each of these letters, there's some nuggets of truth that I'm trying to leave with him, but it's not just speaking to him, it's speaking to myself, it's speaking to anybody else that I know. It's like he who has ears, let him hear. And so I was reading one of the letters, and the opening line, literally, as I talk to my son, dear Jack, it says, a man is what he does. And if you say you're going to do something, do it. And I remember for the longest time, I wanted to be somebody that could be dependable. I wanted to be that person that was a man of action, that literally did those things that, hey, I said something and I went and I accomplished that thing and I did exactly what I said. Many of us would know, in our society, they would know this as, we define it as integrity. It's when the things that you say match your actions. It's interesting, in even thinking of from a biblical context and mindset, people talk about, having faith and believing in God, but then, there's this follow-up of saying, but your life should change. There should be a different fruit that people would see in your life that would match the things that are coming out of your mouth, and so, for me, it's been a long journey to become somebody that, I can look at my life today and say, hey, it seems like, I've got a track record that if I do say something, I'm going to do it. But that wasn't always the case. And integrity isn't about what you say you believe. It's about your life showing that. And so as we all make plans for the new year, and not even just the year, but literally just dreaming in this whole idea of becoming who we were created to be. It's not one to just have the dreams and say, oh, one day I wish, but instead going, I'm going to set my foot down and I'm going to go do these things that I say are important to me. I remember some of the young men that I've coached. One of them, was talking to me and said, oh, God is the most important thing in my life. And I was like, okay, cool. How much time a day do you spend in the Word? Well, not much. How often are you spending praying? Well, not much. You go to church? Well, no. So at what point are you showing me through your actions that is your number one? It could be with anything. I could say that I'm really serious about starting a business. And then if I never start a business and just really have all these ideas, but never put pen to paper to come up with a business plan, to look for funding, all of these things. And it's just kind of they have a saying for it. And I remember the first time I heard it was in Mexico, they said it's puro verbo. It's just words. It doesn't mean anything. And, it would be easy to judge somebody in that space, but there was a large amount of my life where my words didn't mean anything. I really, as a young age, you lie about things and you try and pull quick one on people, but when I remember becoming somebody who like literally could not tell the truth was when I really, really, really had something to hide. And so, by the time I was, 14, 15, and, my mom had passed away, my dad had already passed away, and I have, now this, eating disorder that's literally running my life. Like there was so much shame involved in, being this, 14, 15-year-old boy who, can't stop throwing up, is going and binging on food, and then literally going to the bathroom and purging. And literally my days were spent literally binge purge, binge purge, binge purge. And it must have been hard and exhausting to watch. And also like, at some point you start asking the question, like, what do we do for this young man that, is in front of us? I think about my aunt and uncle, it's like, what do we do? And so for them, I don't know what was going on, but what I do know for me is that there was that fear of disappointing, that fear of rejection, that fear of being found out. And honestly, it was just like, I couldn't think about it then, but it was just like, leave me alone and then, let me crumble in peace, which sounds really strange, but I became somebody that was chronically lying all the time. And I think by then it just became very natural to start bending the truth wherever, I found like maybe it would fit me, or, oh, did you, were you just in the bathroom throwing up? Like, no, I wasn't. It's like, yeah, you were. People can hear you. And honestly, it's like not only the hearing, but even looking at your life as this, totality of the things that you're saying. I was 117 pounds at one point. I was skin and bones. There's no way that I wasn't, I was keeping food down. And so, that was this addiction. And it's not just addiction, but like literally that is one of the ones where it's like you're hiding and you're scared to be found out. And the hardest part for me is that like I wasn't intentionally just trying to deceive people. Like I was in survival mode. I was trying to survive, but I was so shamed, so embarrassed by the life that I was living that I couldn't be honest about it. And that followed me. I created stories wherever I went. When I went off to college, no one knew me, and so it was really easy. No one could check my past of things that I had done or not done, and so I would lie where it fit me. I'd become whatever person I wanted to be, and eventually, and I've talked about wearing the mask, before, and becoming a person that I was just a chameleon. Lying became part of the norm, where you just start becoming versions of yourself that you don't even know. And out of your mouth comes all of these things, and you're like, at some point you're writing checks that it's almost like you can't cash. And so I bring that up today because I for the longest time, wanted to be someone that could just live like in truth. But quite frankly, I didn't live a life that, seemed like I could live out in the truth, I didn't want to tell people the things that were going on, so it was just much easier to lie. And sadly, for the people that were close to me, not my family per se, but they didn't, it's not like people sat there questioning me. But when it came to family or anybody that truly like knew my history, knew my background, like there was no escaping that. And I created a reputation where I was someone that couldn't be trusted. And so, it's easier. It's like literally in trying to hide from people and creating that reputation and then blotting them out of your life, trying to hide even more, because the moment you're in front of the people that know you the best, or like, know your BS and know your history, like you can't lie past that one. And it's uncomfortable. Like people don't want to have the mirror held up to them. No one really is just like, oh yeah, point out to me the things that I'd rather, ignore, and instead, create this web of becoming, anybody else but me. And so, here I am, and I remember, by the time I, reached this pinnacle of where I needed to, I was either going to get sober or I was going to die. I still was unwilling to just divide with the truth. I was unwilling to, I still couldn't be that person that just lived out in the open. Like there was still so much hiding that took place. And because of that hiding, the lies continued. The lies had to be strung along. And it's sad, if you've ever been in that, kind of situation where you're like, you just almost catch yourself like with the small, dumb lies. It's not even like these big, grandiose lies about yourself. It's like, just lying in little things to like get what you want. Somebody's like, hey, did you, do this thing? Oh, no, that wasn't me. Like, it's not like you're going to sit there and get in trouble, but it's like, why are you lying about that? Details of your life that just seem meaningless. And yet you look back and you're like, man, all I do is seem to lie. And, at one part, you like want people to trust you. And yet it's almost like what comes first, chicken or the egg, cart before the horse. Are people just going to start trusting you, or have you lost that and you have something that you need to rebuild? And I think for too many of us, think of, men and fathers who, have talked to their wives, and we've said, oh, I'm going to go do this thing. And then we don't do it. And, they're watching. Or we tell our children we're going to play with them, or we're going to go do something with them. It's like, oh, this thing came up, or this thing came up. And it's like patterns in behavior start to expose and show. Are you a person who says what they will do? Or are you just a talker? Are you puro verbo? Like it's just words. It's full of words. And so, I reached this crossroad. I remember, and this is just such a sad story, but it was before I had gotten sober. And I went to go pick up my niece and nephew from my sister-in-law's house. My brother and her were going through a separation, and I was living with my brother and helping out with their kids at the time. And I went and I picked them up. And I had drank a little bit before I went and got them. I wasn't, hammered by any means or anything like that, but it doesn't matter. Like that's an excuse. I drank before I put them in the car and drove with them and brought them home. And I remember because she had smelled alcohol on my breath and she had called my brother and said something. And, of course, I'm living in hiding. I'm supposed to be the one that's getting sober and all this. And so obviously if I went out and drank, it means that I'm not doing well again. I remember my brother asking me, and he's like, hey, she smelled alcohol in your breath. Have you been drinking? And instantly got defensive. No, that's not, I didn't do that. Why would, and I just remember, when you start gaslighting like that, or you start getting that kind of defensive, usually it's, I've learned at some point, it usually means that you're actually guilty. You kind of look for that. And I remember talking to somebody, a dear friend, pretty shortly after, and I was just kind of pouring out my heart to them. And I was like, why doesn't anyone believe me? I was literally telling them that I hadn't been drinking, even though there was nothing for me to gain from lying to them. So not only did I just lie to my brother, I'm now talking to somebody that I know, a friend of mine, and I'm lying to them while talking to them. Like that's so messed up, just twisting the truth. And I'll never forget what she said to me. She said, trust is built through consistency over time. And I thought about that, and it was like, it wasn't that people just, I didn't deserve anybody's trust. I had lied for so many years and twisted the truth in my favor for so long. And therefore, I had consistently, if anything, lied to other people. I had consistently shown them that I wasn't somebody who could be trusted. That's a really hard pill to swallow. And in fact, the things that I could be trusted to do is drink. I could be trusted to lie. I could be trusted to say I was going to do one thing and do another. And not only now am I living this life where I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, I'm trapped in addiction, and also I'm trapped by everything else around me. And I just felt like a complete fake and a fraud. And I didn't know how I was going to get myself out. And, as I've shared before, there came a point in my life where I surrendered to the, will and power of God, and got sober and started reclaiming my life. And it was almost like, if you think about, a timer or something, it's like any time, to build that trust was like, well, when was the last lie? And then you start looking at the time in between of doing that. We're not looking for perfection. None of us is perfect, but it's like, what is the reputation that you've created for yourself? And so I just decided that I was going to start committing to different practices. I was going to start showing up and doing the things day after day after day after day. And so I, obviously started choosing, every single day I'm not drinking. I was open about how I was doing. I was telling other people where I was struggling, where I was not struggling. I've shared before, and I'll share again. There was that moment when I decided, hey, I need to have a daily spiritual practice where I'm doing a devotional and being in the Word, and doing something consistently. Working out became something that was doing things consistently, and so I had created these habits around myself where it's like, wow, Sean could be dependent to do those things. I've shared it before, and I'll share it again. But I remember there was this moment where I had started, doing a daily Devo, and I worked out and I ate healthy, and that's what I was known for, and so much so that I was sitting one morning outside or in our living room as I was living with my brother and my niece and nephew. And, my nephew would get up in the morning and he'd go watch TV before, his sister got up and my brother got up, and I'd just be down there reading the Bible. And, we're in each other's presence. And I remember him looking across at me and him just going, "You read the Bible a lot." I said, "Yeah, guess I do." So I bet you have a Bible in every room of the house. He goes, and you're always working out and you eat really healthy. And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, I guess you're right, bud." And I thought about that, and I've told that story so many times, and I cherish that moment because it was the first time I realized that somebody outside of me recognized me for the things that I do. Not because I'm defined by the things that I do, but because that was the reputation that my nephew, this young boy, could see that that's what his uncle's about. And it gave me hope to think that one day my son is going to be able to see and go, man, my dad does that every single day. There's a lot of things that people do every single day, but the ones that are worthwhile, the ones that are life-giving, those are the ones that are important and should stay. And so here I am, becoming somebody who, not in my wildest dream had I expected, but I also knew, you remember, like, trust is developed with consistency over time. And so, I wasn't super close with my family after I had left my aunt and uncle's house. I wasn't close to my family. I kind of was a loner, did my own thing. But I was starting to kind of rebuild some of those relationships. And I was working at a specialty run store at the time. And this was before I moved to Mexico. And I remember I got this call from my cousin. And, she was asking for me to help her with something. And I was like, what? And so she asked me for her help, and it wasn't anything, super huge, but, I was like, yeah, I can help you with that. I'll drive over to your house. And, so I ended up helping her, and I followed through, and I remember driving away from her house, and my tears started to fill my eyes. And I remember thinking, wow, somebody who, the most, seemingly unlikely person, trusted me to be dependable, trusted me to do the thing that I said I was going to do. And I showed up, and in that small thing, it was just like, I started to realize that I was becoming somebody that I could trust. And I remember my sister one time, and I can't remember the exact context of it, but she was messaging me back and forth, and I think I was just uncertain about my future, and I think it was probably stepping into go to Mexico and not knowing oh, could I go do this, could I not? And I just remember my sister messaging me, and she's like, God trusts you. And I think about how impactful that was to me, to think that there are people that are chosen, and there's the ones that I'd like to think that I'm amongst the rank of those who volunteer, and to hear that God trusts you, like even just that affirmation of like, hey, I see in you that you are somebody that says they're going to do what they do. And fast forward, that developed and that grew even more. I got to go through this movement, the crucible of Warrior Week. I've talked about it. This program, this movement, this brotherhood that has changed my life, and that's what they're all about. It's setting targets and having daily practices and continuing to do them, because it's doing the work. It's doing the work that matters, that day by day by day you start chipping away at, and you have wins, and you move forward, and you advance in the kingdom, and you keep just going. And at some point, I've been able to look back at my life, and while I am not perfect, becoming somebody where I'm like, wow. And never in my wildest dream did I think that I was going to be on the other side of that, where I have become somebody that when it leaves my mouth, it can be trusted. That I continue to hold myself to a standard where it's either, hey, don't speak, or but when you do speak, make sure that you are committed to fulfilling the thing that you said you're going to do. If you're all in, you got to be all in. And it's just been so exciting to see that as I move forward and advance in life. And I hope that same thing for you, is that you would be able to look at your life as it is today and say, what are the things that I say that I want to do? What are the things that I say I'm going to be about? And not just saying them, but going and doing them. That is the integrity part of it. You don't just say it, you go do it. And imagine, your relationships with people. Imagine if you start knocking down the things time and time again. It doesn't matter if you came from somebody who you can't be trusted, because the more time, like, think about this. Every time you affirm somebody's viewpoint of you, you are literally solidifying what they think. So if you're somebody that is all talk, then guess what? You get the reputation that you're all talk. But imagine you're going against that, say, you promise something to your wife, and now she sees you, I think really the question that people will ask is, okay, cool, they said it again. I wonder what's going to happen this time. And then you start doing it and not making a big deal of it, not going, oh, hey, see, look at the thing I did. It's literally just putting your head down, saying, I'm going to move forward, and going and doing that thing. You become somebody who's trustworthy. You become somebody who is full of integrity, saying, hey, I don't just speak, I act. We're called to act. And so as I think about this forward momentum, and what I want to leave my son with, what I want to leave my family with, is this notion that we're doers. It's not the idea that we're just busybodies going around and we're defined by what we do, but we are people who said, yeah, I said that thing. I'm going to go do it. And if we don't go do it, better be a really good reason for it. You had to pivot, wasn't the right thing. But it's being committed to do those things. And we need more people like that. We need more people to step up and be willing to stand for something. And stand for it again and again and again. And helping move the needle and creating a world better than we found it. Better than we found it. And so, I want to leave you just with, thinking, what's the legacy that you're living? What's the legacy that you're leaving behind? Where in your life do you need to look in the mirror? Where in your life do you need to examine and do the U-turn and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to start today. I know I am one of those people amongst the ranks that, is just all talk. But today I'm going to do. And it requires to have a plan in place, and accountability in place. I literally, at the end of the Yellow Coat Club, I talk about, these protocols. And one of the things that I leave is like saying, hey, you need to have a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a something, literally somebody that you're not going to hide from in your life that can hold you accountable. Because if it's just you relying on you to hold you accountable, it's not always the best way to go. Share the things that you say you're going to do and tell somebody, hey, hold me accountable to this, even if it hurts. Permission for somebody to say, hey, you said you were going to do this thing and you're not doing it. You said you were going to lose the weight. You said you were going to stop drinking. You said. And us being open to hear that. Because far too many of us has fallen along the ranks of people who promise so much and underdeliver. We need to bring integrity back and become a people who literally just follow through with those practices. And integrity is something that we built. A man is what he does. A woman is what she does. Not once, but again and again and again and again. I talked about, one of the last things I'll leave is just this idea of advancing and the becoming. And there's so much richness in thinking that we get to create this life. And so we just continue to ask that question, who do you want to become? Who do you want to become? And then create the plan. I heard forward thinking and backwards planning. Set your eyes on the target. Say, man, I want to be that person who does that. I want to go do incredible things. And then you go do those things. I recently shared with some people close to me about some plans that aren't quite ready for prime time yet, but I was just so excited telling them about, the future that, I'm hoping to step into. And I remember one of them looking at me and they just smiled. And I was like, why are you smiling at me? And they were like, I've only known you for a couple years, but I have no doubt in my mind that everything you just told me, you are going to go do. And that was one of those times where you just sit there and you go, man, look how far God has brought me to become somebody who can be trusted. That when I share that excitement, when I share the journey, that people look at me and go, I have no doubt in my mind that you are going to go do those things that you said you were going to do. And today, I invite you into that same space. I need to be held accountable. I have those people in my life. Who do you have in your life? Go find your tribe. Go find the people that are going to walk beside you through fire. And also the ones that will hold up that mirror and say, just take a look. Remember your words. You don't need to be perfect. But we got to keep following through. We got to keep striking. We got to keep advancing because this world needs more good. This world needs more people to do the things that they said they were going to do. Our wives depend on it. our spouses, our husbands, our kids, people around us, and people we haven't even met yet. Let's be a people who fulfill and do the things that we said we're going to do again and again and again. I want to thank you so much for joining me. I'm just so blessed, and I can't wait to keep sharing with you guys some of the amazing things that I feel like are on the cusp of the radar for me. And it's not about me, it's about literally this becoming and just stepping into what God has for you. You have so much life to live. You have so much to offer. And if you're not living a life that you are proud of, or a life that you feel has value or meaning, ask yourself what that looks like. See where it doesn't align with where you're at today. Not perfection, not anything like that. Just go, man, if only I could. And then ask yourself, why can't I? Because I will tell you, with God, all things are possible. Journey through the becoming. Let's go.